For this week's review, I decided to take a look at Deadpool and Wolverine, the third installment in the Deadpool series, but the first one for the character after joining the MCU following Disney acquiring the rights to the character from Fox. And for the most part, I thought the movie was pretty decent and I really enjoyed myself while watching it. Ryan Reynolds clearly knows and loves the character and is having a ball while filming it. And at first I was kind of worried that Disney was going to force them to pull their punches when it comes to fourth wall breaking jokes at Disney's expense. But come to find out, they actually were pretty even-handed when it comes to a lot of the jokes at Disney's expense. I think they could have gone harder in some instances, but it's not like Disney was left completely unscathed. It does go to show that there is a certain self-awareness on their part, or at least the executives didn't step in the way and make them not have to have those sort of things. And if you think Disney's going to tone down Deadpool because it's part of the MCU now, you're sorely mistaken. Obviously, the movie is R-rated, but it's not like they're just having a couple obligatory F-bombs in the movie so they can say that it still has an R rating in order to try to appease people who would be upset if it was a PG-13 Deadpool, because throughout the movie, there's a ton of cursing and there's a lot of very crude and crass humor in the movie. The opening credits is extremely violent and bloody, and it pretty much just sets the tone to what's to be expected from the rest of the movie. Hugh Jackman slid back into the role of Wolverine like a well-fitting pair of yellow spandex. The guy's been playing this character for nearly quarter century and he clearly knows what he's doing, and it just seems like another day at the office for him. Like, he can handle playing Wolverine completely effortlessly. I was wondering how they're going to handle bringing Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine after he had such a good send-off in 2017's Logan, so I appreciate that this movie addressed it right out of the gate in a manner that's really fitting with a Deadpool type movie. And I don't think they're being disrespectful, even though the movie itself is trying to deliberately be disrespectful in a sort of ironic kind of way. If I was to look at it, I would say that Logan was probably Wolverine's final number. And what we saw with him in this movie is sort of an encore performance. He's doing something that honors the character, but it's also giving fans something that they haven't seen with the character before and something that I think a lot of people will enjoy. I do have one main issue with the story, though, as it pertains to the time frame of events when it comes to this movie as well as Logan, because they're supposed to take place within the same universe, but the years don't seem to mesh up. Maybe there was something that was addressed and I missed it, or maybe I'm overthinking it, but either way, I just thought it was kind of strange. The dynamic between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in this movie is just textbook funny man and straight man. In the previous two Deadpool movies, he's always been the funny man, and there's been several characters in each movie that kind of play the straight man sort of thing. But in this movie, the straight man is the co-lead of the movie, and he's also a character that a lot of fans love seeing on screen. It's just a wonder that it's taking this long for the two to actually be together in a proper movie if you don't count X-Men Origins Wolverine. But I'm glad they actually got the chance to make a movie together because it definitely works. There's also a lot of cameo appearances in this movie, which I'm sure most people are aware of because the marketing for this film are leaning heavily into all the cameo appearances in it. And while I do think some of those promotional materials are giving away a little bit too much, especially the final trailer, I think some of them would have been better suited for a big reveal within the movie itself. There are still a lot of big reveals that aren't shown in any of the promotional materials, and unlike other movies that have tried to do this sort of thing, like The Flash last summer comes to mind, where they marketed on a bunch of cameo appearances and it was just CGI characters, blink and you miss it. In this movie, there are some bigger characters that are kind of showing up as a background actor, but some of the biggest cameo appearances in this movie actually play a pretty significant role in the overall story. There are obviously a lot of Easter eggs and references throughout this movie, and one of the things I really appreciate about it is they don't feel like it's necessary to draw attention to each one. They're just kind of there in case you happen to notice it, which I think really helps in a comedy movie like this, because if there's rewatchability to it, then you might notice something different that you haven't noticed the previous time that you watch it. It's just unfortunate because I don't think there's a whole lot of rewatchability to this movie, because outside of the spectacle of it, there's really not a whole lot to it. And the story itself is probably one of the weakest points of this movie. In fact, I think this is probably the weakest story out of the three Deadpool movies. It more or less just acts as a vehicle so they can get Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds together in their respective roles with all these different characters surrounding them. The film's main villain isn't very interesting either. She doesn't have a personal connection with Wolverine or Deadpool and doesn't have a real reason to be antagonistic towards them, but she just wants to be evil for the sake of being evil. And it seems like her motivation shifts several times throughout the movie. I don't think I'm out of line when I say I wish there was a little bit more depth to the story. I'm not asking for like an Oscar caliber movie or anything like that, because I understand it's basically just an excuse to get Wolverine and Deadpool together. but I think they could have done the exact same thing while still giving us a little bit more to chew on. The best thing this movie has going for it is just the fact that it was clearly something that was made with love and respect for the source material. And I'm not just talking about Deadpool and X-Men, but pretty much every Fox comic book movie that's came before it from the late 90s up until now. This movie is a loving send-off to all those comic book movies in the past and kind of a reminder to Disney that even though you own the rights to these characters now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you own the fans either. You still have to earn that respect and trust from them, and if you want to actually win this audience over, then you have to be respectful to the characters that you acquired the rights to. And that's what I like about this movie. It's not a perfect comic book movie by any stretch of the imagination. There was a lot they could have done to make it better, but I think for the most part, it still was a very fun movie, and it's filled with fan service and just pure spectacle. And I really liked a lot of the stuff that I saw, and I wasn't bored while watching this movie. The fighting and action scenes were fun to watch, and they varied enough so you never felt like you were watching the same thing over again. The dialogue was sharply written with the jokes coming at you quick, so even if something didn't quite land, they would quickly move on to something else and you could just kind of forget about it. And for the most part, the characters were well done, including the cameo appearances and some of the smaller roles from people that I never thought I would actually see them in a comic book movie again, or at least not in this particular role, but I was glad to actually see them in this movie, even if I didn't necessarily think going into it that I would have wanted to see them in these roles. The biggest thing holding this movie back, though, is there's not a whole lot to the plot, and once you get past all the cameos and surprises and Easter eggs, there's really not a whole lot of substance left. And that's why I will give it a 7 out of 10, because it's something decent, and I do recommend people go and check it out, because I think you will enjoy it, especially if you were a fan of the first 2 Deadpool movies. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news, check out some more of my movie reviews, or maybe you can even check out some of my retro movie reviews. And if you haven't already, click that like button and share the video out there with the friends too, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.